On July 2, 1881, James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, was assassinated by a mentally unstable gunman in the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C. Garfield had been president for just around 4 months, having been inaugurated on March 4th of that year. It's important to take a step back and understand the divisions within the Republican Party at that time over the issue of public service appointments. The previous structure, called the patronage system or spoils system, gave the winners of federal elections the ability to appoint whoever they wanted to fill out the federal bureaucracy. This created a situation in which connections mattered much more than merit, leading to plenty of corruption. One major faction of the Republican Party was called the Stalwarts, who supported the continuation of the patronage system. Their leader was Senator Roscoe Conkling of New York, who controlled the most desirable bureaucratic position in the country, the role of the Collector of the Port of New York. Their opposition was the half-breeds. They believed in civil service reform, the idea that political appointees should have qualifications beyond connections to the powerful. The tension between these two camps became significant during the nominating process for the Republican candidate in the 1880 presidential election. Garfield, a longtime member of the House of Representatives, was chosen as a compromise candidate, and he went on to win a close victory. This is where Charles Guiteau comes into the narrative. He was a supporter of former President Ulysses S. Grant, the stalwart nominee for the 1880 election, even writing a speech in his support. Guiteau switched his support to Garfield when he became the nominee. He pressured Republican officials to let him give the speech originally written for Grant. They finally relented and let him do so before a small crowd. However, Guiteau had simply replaced Grant's name with Garfield's in the text, and had not modified any other details, making it very strange for the listeners. Despite this, Guiteau believed that his speech had helped Garfield to win the state of New York, which was key to his presidential victory. As such, he thought that he was entitled to a government position under the patronage system, and set his sights on the role of ambassador to France. Guiteau's efforts to secure the ambassadorship failed, and he was seen as an annoyance by the new president's administration. Garfield also made serious efforts to end the patronage system. Guiteau believed that he could both thwart this attempt at civil service reform and receive the Paris ambassadorship by assassinating Garfield, as his vice president, Chester Arthur, was a supporter of patronage. President Garfield was supposed to depart from Washington, D.C. on July 2, 1881, which was published in the local newspapers. Additionally, similar to other U.S. presidents of the era, Garfield did not have bodyguards who followed him around. Garfield planned to leave from the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station, which is now the location of the West Building of the National Gallery of Art. Upon Garfield's entrance to the station's waiting room, Guiteau shot him twice from behind at close range, with one bullet grazing his arm and the other penetrating his back, coming to rest in his abdomen. Guiteau was apprehended by a police officer upon trying to exit the station. Garfield remained conscious throughout the day and was taken back to the White House. He survived the night, and doctors had hoped that he would recover the next morning. However, a bullet was still lodged in his abdomen. The doctors attending to Garfield probed the bullet wound with unsterilized hands and instruments in an attempt to remove it. Noted inventor Alexander Graham Bell created a simplistic metal detector to locate the bullet, but it ultimately was not helpful. Garfield spent the rest of the summer in Washington, D.C. in a steadily worsening state. I will not go into the gory details, but suffice it to say that Garfield spent much of the summer in pain, while doctors continued to poke and prod him to no avail. He suffered from bouts of fever, struggled to ingest solid foods, had large-scale infections develop, and suffered from hallucinations for a time. Garfield was eventually transferred to a seaside home in New Jersey on September 6th in the hopes that the fresh air and peaceful setting might help him to recover. However, his condition continued to deteriorate, and he died on September 19, 1881. Modern-day doctors believe that Garfield could have survived his injuries if he had had more capable doctors and/or if he was being treated with modern-day and not 1880s level medical knowledge. Guiteau's trial began in November 1881. His legal team attempted to utilize the insanity defense, the idea that he had a mental disorder at the time of Garfield's shooting and thus was not responsible for his actions, which was one of the first significant cases where it had been attempted in the United States. However, he was convicted on January 25, 1882, and hung on June 30th. Garfield was succeeded as president by his vice president, Chester A. Arthur. Garfield was a strong supporter of civil service reform, and the trauma of his assassination helped lead to the passage of the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act in January 1883.